And like a lot of how I work, and I'm sure a lot of how other attachment types work, especially nines, is you send out this ping that is indirect, but it is an honest location. And then if it's not pinged back, it's taken as rejection. And you're just like, okay, that doesn't have a place in the atmosphere, so I will not bring it out.
Welcome to another episode of What It's Like to Be You. I'm Josh Levine, your host. Today, my guest is Alexandra Arroyo-Acevedo. She is a social self-pres 9-wing-1 963 trifix, so Bermuda 9 with a 154 overlay. First of all, people in our community know who Alexandra is. She is one of the co-hosts now on the Big Hormone Enneagram podcast. She is John Lekovich's partner, and she has undergone a radical revolution of selfhood that until this point, I don't think we've really explored outside of the context of she moved from one relationship to another. What I love about this conversation is it contextualizes that move in the bigger frame of Alexandra's entire life story. And what this conversation really is Alexandra just telling her life story from the point of view of being a triple attachment social 9. So what it was like for Alexandra in previous phases of life to basically live from a place of passive acceptance of whatever would come into her world, and a sense of playing it safe or looking for the thing that would be safe, that would feel safe, and living from a place of muted and suppressed selfhood. One of the things that Alexandra's life story is such a good representation of is the central question of attachment, which is, am I living the life that's really mine? Am I really being myself? And as we learn from Alexandra's telling, she wasn't really being herself, and she has been in the process of discovering and excavating and now protecting the newly consolidated sense of self that she has found. So, and this is a big one, we also talk a lot about how she's still in process with that. So there was obviously this massive revolution of selfhood. She broke up with her ex. She moved from Florida to New York, in with John, and she now has a new place in a new community that was pre-given, and she's undergoing the process of discovering what is actually hers and what is not hers. So if you're a triple attachment type and you're listening to this, I imagine you'll find a lot that you relate to in this conversation. I have learned so much about my own patterns as a triple attachment type through Alexandra's characterization of her patterns. And I just have to say, I mean, point blank, Alexandra is brilliant. She has this beautiful, scientific, self-reflective, psychologically minded way of processing the world, and there's a certain precision and poetry with her articulation of what she discovers inside herself. And you can also see she's now publishing YouTube videos of really, really good analysis of reality TV, like The Bachelorette, from the point of view of the Enneagram, and her insights are just like really pinpoint precision. So this conversation is incredibly rich and vivid, and Alexandra's life story is just such a beautiful example of what happens when a triple attachment type starts to really honor the question, who am I really, and what is the life that I would like to live, and stopping just simply passively accepting whatever comes into my world and begin the process of choosing what is mine and what is not mine. So with that, I have a plug also that Alexandra and I are going to be teaching a class about attachment. We are doing an attachment type support group. It starts August 22nd, which is just in a couple of weeks or maybe even days from the date of this release. And it will be 8 Tuesdays in a row at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. If you are a core attachment type, meaning if your core type is 3, 6, or 9, then you are invited to join. So this is a no hexad space. You're allowed to have hexad fixes, but if your core type is an attachment type 3, 6, or 9, then we would love to have you. We're going to be talking about what are the psychological mechanisms that cause us to betray or abandon ourselves, and what it takes to come back home. We're going to be supporting each other in that. There's going to be a lot of sharing. It's not going to be as pedagogical or teacherly of a course. There's not going to be that much lecture. It really is a support group style class. So please check that out. There's more information on the enneagramschool.com, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you there. Okay. One final thing to set up this interview. Alexandra and I have been trying to schedule this interview for a while, and we actually did round one of it a few months ago, but it was lost because the internet connection severed about 45 minutes into it. It's very sad for everybody, for me anyway. So we talk a little bit about the place that Alexandra was in during that interview and the way that she showed up in that interview, a little more clammy, a little more frozen, and there was a thawing process, which if we had captured it would have represented or shown or demonstrated a certain aspect of 9, social 9. But the fact that Alexandra and I are now closer friends, we have a lot more comfort and ease. This conversation flowed a lot more. And to me, it represents how social 9 naturally emerges into or moves to 3 when there is a kind of social holding in which they can feel comfortable. So, yeah, the contrast was interesting. We kind of explored that a little bit, but I wanted to give you a sense of where that exploration comes from because without context, it would have been a little confusing. So without further ado, here is my friend, Alexandra. So the energy already in this conversation is different from our first interview. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a bummer that we don't have that footage.
I know.
It was lost to the universe, but
to the ether. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, there's a way I'm grateful for it too, because I don't know if that I could handle cringing at myself that hard. But
do you remember what happened
with losing the video, or no, just what was going on with me?
Yeah, for you. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it was not being able to locate myself fast enough. There was the camera. There was the knowledge that this is going to be seen by a wider audience. So I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be this like completed package right away. And then on top of that, like you and I weren't necessarily super familiar with each other. We had hung out a few times, but like our personal relationship to each other wasn't necessarily developed. It was kind of a we both know John thing. So I felt like you knew me in the phrasing. How do I say this? You knew me through John's presentation of me versus me. And so I felt like I had to upkeep that presentation versus just show you who I am.
Well, okay. That's interesting because I actually, my side of the story is a little different because I felt like I kind of knew you. I mean, I didn't know you nearly as well as I know you now. But like I'd hung out with you before, at least like a number of times, like more than actually, like more than that.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, more than just like twice or something.
And we had like pre-interview conversations. We had we had a few of those that were one-on-ones. So we logged like a lot of time together. Yeah.
Yeah, we had. Yeah,
including
and that's what I mean.
Group settings, one-on-one. Yeah, that's right. So I felt like I had a sense of kind of who you are, but your framing of it is interesting to me because you felt like, and this maybe we just go here because you felt like I was seeing you through John's eyes. And there's a certain way that, I mean, that has triple attachment, social 9 kind of written all over it.
All over it. Yeah. And I feel like that's important to emphasize because I recognize now in hindsight, it's interesting to hear you say that actually, because it's like I knew that, but forgot at the same time. I recognize now that I was just projecting that all over you. So I think what was going on for me really was that I didn't have my sense that you knew me for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like I thought you just knew me through John. And so I was having to locate myself in a different way. It was this weird kind of inception thing. It was like, okay, Josh wants to interview me, but he knows me through John. And so I need to be me through John and da-da-da-da. And then add all the pressure of like the cameras and the audience and the whatever, and the having to locate myself in real time. And I was just struggling. Yeah.
So I wish we can't play a clip because it's gone. But
I know
there was this process of like camera on, and then all of a sudden you were in a frozen state. You froze.
Yeah,
and we talked for about 45 minutes, and I kept lobbing questions at you, and then there was a thawing, but it was very slow. Right, it was a very slow melting. And then we didn't, and then and then it stopped because the internet cut out. So
yeah, the universe saved me.
I know. So what's different now?
Well, I mean, especially now knowing that you were in a different place than I was projecting onto you, I think I'm just in a different place. I feel like, and there's some social stuff definitely wrapped up into this, but I feel like my relationship and my friendship with you has become more grounded. There's a certain social regulation that I think like we have with each other now, that is grounding for me, as opposed to you just being like a blank thing that I'm supposed to perform to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on top of that, this is kind of going back with what I said earlier, but I just have a felt sense that your expectation of me is just me. I think, you know what I think it is like, at this point, I have experienced myself being myself in front of you. So now I believe that you know who I am because I've been able to like be in that state in front of you.
That's excellent.
And so now I think your
good.
expectations of me are accurate as opposed to a performance. There it is.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's insane. And it's this thing where like, I know that it's this weird, like pressure math that I put on myself that no one else is putting on me, but it's still something I have to, like a jungle gym, I have to go through.
Yeah. And actually I do it too. And I don't know that I would articulate it in a very similar way, actually. And I'm trying to call an experience to mind. Anyway, the point is yeah, there's a way that it's like this person that I'm now talking to only knows a certain dimension of me, according to me. And for me to reveal the rest of me, that whole process of revealing the rest of me is usually a tiptoe process. You know, it's like a little more. And is this still, do I still feel safe? Does this person still like what, you know, am I feeling seen, held, appreciate, whatever? And then tiptoe a little further and then a little further. And eventually there's like the full blossoming of the flower that is me. You know? And then once that's there, and then the person is like with me there, and then it feels safe. Then it feels safe. You know what I mean? So I guess so from your point of view, you hadn't kind of tiptoed, you hadn't fully revealed yourself, and so there was still. It's just amazing how that is its own like internal box. You know, you sort of assert upon yourself, or that we assert upon ourselves. And maybe this is a specifically social Bermuda thing.
Yeah, I think so. There's, I'm going to totally mess this up, but I know there's some like physics function or something like that. That I don't know if it's law or whatever it is, but it suggests that when attention is put on something, the quality of it changes. And that's how I feel a lot of the time.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I love this. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can't remember what it's called. Somebody will know. But another way of phrasing it, and I think maybe one of the differences between you and I, because I absolutely can imagine you're relating to me on this. But I think from a 9 perspective, the process that I have to go through in order to unfold in front of someone is I have to get in contact with my unself-consciousness, or like I have to realize that I have been in like playful unself-conscious states. And then I put together like, oh, I've been witnessed in that state, as opposed to a sort of careful, intentional unfolding. It's more, you know, like this past weekend, even yesterday when you and I hung out, was that yesterday? Yeah. Was that yesterday?
2 days ago.
Whatever.
Yeah.
When you and I hung out, you said something about witnessing me just being myself. And it's one of those moments where I have to like look back and realize, oh yeah, people have already seen me be myself without me realizing that I was doing that, you know, because I don't want to perform my selfness, because in certain ways, I don't know what that is. I have to be unself-conscious in order to just be that.
Boom. Yeah.
So confusing. I know.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
someone
my life.
Told me. Yeah. Someone told me a while ago that it would be helpful for me to track my states of unself-consciousness. And that just seems like the key for me in a lot of ways, to just like reveal who I am. It's more, I don't know, maybe this is 9ish too, but it's like even my revealing has to be passive.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
Well, yeah. We talked about, I've told you all the stories from this. I was a participant in a dating coaching program, and it's a whole thing, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but
yeah.
I went out with a group of guys, and there was a dating coach who would tell us to go talk to girls, and then he would give us feedback. And it was a month-long program, and it was actually life-changing for me because it forced me to access that state of playful unself-consciousness before I even entered an interaction. And so for me, it was just reps of being in that state and accessing that state when it was psychologically the last place that I would ever go, except being pushed, other than being pushed by this guy. So that's why it was life changing, because I accessed a state of freedom of expression that I knew was in me, but that I never could tap into unless I was in like the last time I remember being in that state was when I was like the president of my a cappella group in college, and I was just goofy, silly, and absolutely free because I knew that the adoration of my peers was like
safe.
certain.
Yeah. Secure, right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So
it's funny that it's funny I can relate to you on that, because I was vice president of my choir when I was in high school, and it was a similar thing. I was just like, I know this environment, I'm comfortable in this environment, people know me in this state, so
yeah.
now I can just like hang out and play and
right.
not put all this pressure on myself to like perform to a certain degree, or to make sure that everybody's being comfortable, or to make sure I'm in alignment with other people. It's just whatever. It's free for all.
Yeah. So, yeah, where my mind's going is I want to geek out about how that is. You could kind of categorize that in the context of like the body holding and the social holding environment, and then the three, like the layer of gaze. And then I'm curious about the mental center, how that plays into this, but I kind of feel like that would get boring if we went there. So let's not.
Okay.
let's I want to know about I feel like now at this moment I'm meeting you, like we have revealed ourselves to each other, and we are now friends, and we feel safe. And so, and here we are. And that's been a journey. And I'm curious from your point of view, contextualizing that in a broader sense, your story as a 9. And I'm thinking in particular about, like, you could trace it all the way back to your life with your ex-fiance, and then moving to New York, and then moving in literally immediately with John, and then entering basically his world and discovering yourself in relation to all the things that are quote unquote his, but then discovering what's actually yours, what's your choice, what's choosing you, and coming into like an independent relationship with the things that were in his world, and also things that are outside of his world that are yours.
Yeah. Oof, man. Okay, well, I'll disclaim at the top that I'm still in process with that, so I can't give any. These are not going to be answers with like neat little bows on top of them. But yeah, it has been a whole story. And okay, so taking your starting place, I'll actually go a little before that. Okay. So before I moved to New York, I was operating, I would say there were like different stages of 9ness that I was operating off of. And a lot of them had to do with my relationships, both romantic and platonic friendships, I guess. Let's see. And a lot of how I was operating was with the passive acceptance of whatever just floated into my environment. There were certain standards I had. There were certain filters that I put in place. But a lot of it was like an active choosing process was just not a part of the equation before I moved here. And so what happened was I would be in college, for example, and it was just the friends that adopted me were the friends that I would spend my time with. And maybe we had something in common. Maybe it was just like a comfort that developed, but it was not an active choosing. And similarly with relationships, it was just, you know, sort of the passive acceptance of what was in my environment and what I already found myself comfortable with, not necessarily activated by. Okay, so then, yeah, I get into a relationship with my last relationship, and let's see, how do I put this? It was fine. Like,
Was
you know,
was that a was that a thing that just sort of chose you and that you passively accepted in the way that you
yes,
were just describing? Yeah.
yes, for sure. Yes, it
Floated into your
was
world and you just all of a sudden barnacled onto it and that was that.
exactly that. Yes. In fact, like, part of that story was when him and I initially met, my impulse was to actually say no. And I said no. And then there was more pursuit in my direction. And I was like, okay, well, this is a nice person. This is, he's like showing a lot of interest. Who am I to say no? You know, like there's a lot of really like a lot of how I've navigated has been, I have seen the absence of red flags as green flags, as opposed to actually seeing green flags or
Oh, that's
actually
good.
feeling
Yeah.
pulled or moved towards something. A lot of my navigation was just like, if there's no danger present, then that must be good, because there's fucking danger everywhere. So yeah, that was that relationship, just an absence of red flags. So I was like, okay, let's do this.
Sorry, just real quick.
Mhm.
What's danger?
Any kind of signs of deceit, or like I'm going to be played with, or like I'm not going to be taken seriously. I was really careful about, I mean, to put it in plain terms, like just like fuckboy energy was just like the biggest red flag to me. So anybody that emoted even a little bit of that or anything, any like little hint of that I picked up on was just an immediate no. You know, and part of this comes from like my history with my parents getting divorced and stuff like that. So that was like the main navigational tool that I was using, was just evading any kind of danger. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, yeah.
A little ambiguous.
Danger's
Okay.
well, no, it's just that's a loaded term, danger.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
and you're interpreting it through the lens of social 9 and what is dangerous anyway, and also not just social 9, but your entire life context and what informs that for you and your PTSD from various experiences, whether it's parents' divorce or I know you've had experiences with friends that have kind of betrayed you and said like, so that there's a lot packed into that word danger.
Yeah. It was, I mean, a different way of putting it too is I just didn't want to be, I didn't want any sudden changes. Like I was really looking for something stable and something I could really rely on, and something that really wouldn't cause a lot of ripples, which is just so 9.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot of it too. So like an unexpected change in direction, no, not happening at all.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to reorient myself with like sudden change?
Oh, and I'm sorry to drag this on, but is that also, is that a relic from, or is that like your felt sense impression of like the divorce that was a sudden seismic change, tectonic kind of earthquake?
Yes. I don't think I would have ever thought of that until just now, but absolutely. So for context, my mom is a 9, my dad is a 6, my sister's a 9, I'm a 9. We're a very attachment family. We're all sexual blind. So like the status quo is like, that's what we hang on to. That's where we can chill. And yes, my parents suddenly splitting up like changed the entire environment. And I mean, the 4 of us individually had like really explosive differences, not with each other, but just like just the water we were swimming in was suddenly taking us in different directions, and we were having to orient in different ways, and there was just no normal anymore. And so it seems like since that point, we've been like trying to find our own individuated normals, all 4 of us. So yeah, that was a good connection. I did not connect that myself. So yes, that was definitely part of my decision making.
Okay.
Okay. Where am I in the story?
So we're now talking about, you said this.
Oh,
your ex-fiance
safe,
was
basically
safe. Yeah.
Yes. And that's not a good enough reason to move forward with something. But that was good enough for me at the time. So we were together, and, you know, whatever novelty, whatever new kind of like, I don't know, feeling of hopefulness, that faded really fast, like really quickly. However, the feeling of safety was still there. And so I found myself being kind of internally conflicted because on one end, there was this lack of what I perceived as emotional intimacy and like inability to affect each other in a way that would be renewing. But then on the other hand, it was like, on the other end, it was like, this is a good person. I'm not just going to fling myself back out into the world where I see stories where everybody's, you know, cheating on this person and this person's backstabbing this person. And there's just like chaos everywhere. So yeah, I hung on. Let's see. We get engaged just too soon. He's a 7. I think he just like jumped into it too soon. And I passively accepted that as well. And I remember even in that moment, I was just not sure. Like I was just like, I didn't. Go ahead.
Will you tell, can you paint that moment? That's such a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, by this point, like I said earlier, I had already felt whatever hopefulness I felt in the beginning was already fading. Whatever purpose that we had been brought to each other, I feel like it was like whatever happened was supposed to happen already. And now we're kind of just like hanging on to something we're not supposed to be hanging on to. And so, yes, I remember we got engaged really fast. It was very impulsive. It was not planned out. He asked me to be with him. And I remember even feeling in the moment that he doesn't know what he's asking. He doesn't know he doesn't like understand the gravity of what he's asking. Mm-hmm. But I said yes on the hopes that we could get on the same page, on the hopes that I could feel that his page was the same as mine. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm trying to. Yeah.
Yeah. The hope is that it's like you said yes to the possibility that you could one day be on the same page.
Correct. Yes.
That's a really interesting, I mean, from the point of view of attachment. I mean, that is
exactly. Yes.
That is attachment. That's a really interesing framing, a very good framing of attachment, right? It's like, that's what attachment is doing. It's like,
it's negotiating basically. It's like, hoping that I can shapeshift to get the result I want.
That's right. It's holding on to that hope that like, if I can meet you over here, and then maybe that means you can meet me over here too. There's a hopefulness about it.
Mm-hmm. And a determination in my experience. Like there's a certain,
also, determination. Ahead. I was just going to say, but fundamentally the hopefulness is actually, it's like it's created by, or it's triggered by, sparked by the unconscious knowing that whatever this is not the same page.
Yes.
And then the attachment strategy
gets activated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that becomes your entire ego agenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
To make it right, even though it's not right. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah, 1,000,000%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I remember what was happening there too was it was such a split experience, because on one end I heard the question and knew the possibility of what that could mean. Like, oh, I'm being committed to right now. That's what a person wants. You know, that's what I want. But on the other hand, I don't know that we're on the same page of what commitment means, you know, of what the like duty behind that is, what the expectations behind that is. So, so the attachment activated. It's like, well, I'm getting the commitment, so I will work with that and we will negotiate everything as we go. I'll see if I can carry us to like the frequency and like the certain emotional frequency that I need us to be at in order to like actually move forward. But this is a placeholder that's good for now.
Yeah. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this feeling was contained in a felt sense in the moment when you said yes, right? And I'm wondering if that relationship was a place where you could have a conversation like this, like, in other words, my experience of you is that you are so insightful about your own patterns, and you have such really good language and precision and a kind of creativity, like there's like a poetry that comes out of you when you describe your attachment patterns.
Thank you.
And it's kind of like art and scientist kind of getting in there with like, it's just very, it's very like, yeah.
Cool.
Unveiling
Thank you.
unveiling the spider web that is under. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And
yeah, that's funny. It does feel very scientisty.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And that's something, I don't know. Did you have a place for that before you were in kind of this social group that you are now in with the Enneagram?
No. I can maybe identify one friend that I had when I was still in Florida that was able to give me that. And she and I had we had a really heartfelt connection because it was like we could be, that image of that guy from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where he's like doing the whole conspiracy thing and he looks kind of deranged.
Oh yeah.
I like being in that energy. I like being in that like activated, like wacky inventor scientist thing.
Yeah.
And she was the one person in Tampa where I lived before that could engage me in that way. But no, my relationship had no space for that.
Right.
Because I thought it was, and I mean, in certain ways, it's possible that I didn't even try because I perceived that as like, I don't know, I had preconceptions that being in that state was like fringe is too strong a word. It's just too strong a word, but it's like too activated or too much somehow. I'm sure I could find like the right adjective, but I had a predisposed judgment on that state of being that I can't be that active because it's like, I don't know, annoying, frustrating, too much, boring was a lot of the judgment. A lot of my attempts towards even being in this state with like friends was to see eyes glass over. So I was like, okay, no, that's a no. That's my attempt. The attempt says no.
So that's, I mean, not to be whatever textbook or pedagogical, but like that right there is social nine, right? That's the that's the tamping down of your own life energy to preserve the social harmony that is the current state.
Yep.
And the current state can't bear myself, my
disruption,
own,
the
disruption that is just me speaking up and revealing myself and being who I am. Which is why 9 needs to go to 3, right? As we were kind of talking about that the other day. Anyway, so yeah.
I mean, so I did not have really space for that in that relationship. And so what I experienced in hindsight is that there was just so actually, okay, so sorry, I'm being a little messy. What I experience in hindsight is that social harmony priority made it so that I would say the majority of myself, like I would say like 75% of myself, basically just like not my creaturely here is myself in physical space and time, that I felt was fine. But a lot of my internal process I felt was too disruptive. And so, or just like not a match. And so I just didn't put it out there. And like a lot of how I work, and I'm sure a lot of how other attachment types work, especially 9s, is you send out this ping that is indirect, but it is an honest location. And then if it's not pinged back, it's taken as rejection. And you're just like, okay, that doesn't have a place in the atmosphere. So I will not bring it out.
That's so well said. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
I experienced that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a lot of what I experienced. And again, it was just this priority of, and I guess this is part of where the self-effacement comes in, because I didn't think to push that. I didn't think to assert that needed space, and that even if it cost him his peace, like whatever, relationships are not always peaceful. It's fine. Hang on, I just lost my train of thought a little bit. So yeah, over time, it just created this big separation between like the harmony that we were allowed to have together, the harmony that I was able to maintain with us together, versus where I was actually located, where most of my energy was dominated. This is with the Enneagram. As I started to sink into the Enneagram in that relationship, started to find it in that relationship. Astrology really was way before that, but even that was kind of a topic that I couldn't really play with out loud without it feeling like it was disruptive. And I'll say this too, like, this goes back to the beginning of this conversation where a lot of this is self-imposed. I am perceiving myself as being disruptive or myself as not being a match, and I'm perceiving that as a bad thing, and I'm doing the withholding on my own. My autonomous decisions are to be withholding of myself.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and that creates this big division to where I no longer feel connected. I no longer feel like I have a home in, or at least just like a safe place to present myself. And sure, I'm not in any kind of like external danger. My external environment's not going to be disrupted anytime soon, but I can't, me as like the social being, as a spirit, has no space here. And I've done that for myself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to emphasize that because I think a lot of attachment types can get into the language of this person did not make space for me, when really it's you didn't make space for yourself because of how you were perceiving you were being perceived. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, you're doing great. It's that, I mean, okay. It's so hard for attachment types to take responsibility over that pattern.
Yeah.
I mean, I've experienced that. It's really embarrassing. I mean, it's like,
it's so embarrassing.
You know, it's like, it hurts really bad to see that in yourself.
Yeah.
And the relationships in which you've done the most hiding or the most adapting, that's where the most anger comes up. And it's like, fuck you for not reciprocating my whatever, or for not creating the space for me, or for not paying attention to me in the way that I needed to be, whatever. But it's like, you know, and maybe that's true, but also the thing really is that you didn't do it for yourself. And that's a very hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's very well said. Yeah. And so the end of this relationship comes in two different ways. And I'll explain both of them. But the first one that I think is important to spell out is that, yes, I was withholding myself while still leaving my like physical presence out there. You know, if that makes, it's just like the typical 9 thing of like they're there, but they're dissociated.
Yeah.
So I was out there and I was doing all the hiding myself. But what that ended up doing, how do I want to phrase this? Basically, okay, had I been responsible and aware of these at the time, how do I phrase this? Had I been connected to myself, it would have been much easier for me to leave that relationship much sooner. Like the practice of dividing myself prolonged that relationship because I was able to keep like a pseudo connection going when I wasn't actually connected. You know what I'm saying? So if I hadn't made that division, this relationship just would not have lasted, anywhere near as long as it did. It only lasted as long as it did because I was really good at dividing myself. Okay, so that's I feel like that's important to say because it would have just died on its own. Okay. Enter the atomic bomb or whatever. So yeah, in this relationship, I rediscovered the Enneagram. I remember it was introduced to me like a few years prior, but it was just like in a social environment. I quickly just took a test and it escaped my mind. And then in around 2019, I saw like an Instagram post with the word Enneagram on it and remembered it and took the test again. And long story short, it just reignited my interest in the Enneagram, but in a way that stuck this time because I could see that it was something deeper than just like a BuzzFeed test, which is basically what all these other typological systems do. It's like, what are you? Oh, you're a canary, and then you just move on. So to see that there was work to be done was already very exciting for me. And then on top of that, to see there was a community of people that were engaging with it made it more exciting for me, because I started to make these connections. And even before connections were made, I started to have a network of people I could ping off of. I could be that like crazy scientist with, but everyone was doing it. And so it didn't feel weird. It didn't feel unwelcome. We were all just like mixing chemicals together and seeing what came out. And it's in this time period that I found Enneagram or Universe. And I joined a chat with, a bunch of people, started making more connections there. And then it got to the point where this type of conversation was so engaging and so exciting for me that I'm in these conversations every day. Every day I'm on my phone talking to just like avatars that may or may not exist, but can engage with me in a level, in like a quality of attention that I had been in such a deficit in, that I was just like starved of.
Yeah.
And it's important to say too, that like, it is not romantic attention. It's not flirtatious attention. It was just this like analytical exploration that was just stimulating. It was just stimulating and fun and exciting. And I felt like I was mentally working. I was just working out mentally, and it felt great. So, so I'm developing all these connections. 2020 happens, pandemic just like kills all social life, all in-person social life. And let's see. And then the IEA conference that happens every year gets canceled. By like September, I believe, this chat starts to make plans, makes plans to all meet up because the conference has been canceled, but they still want to hang out. I make the decision that I'm going to go. And I should say that before attending this trip, I had never traveled by myself. I had never really made, it sounds dramatic, but it's true. I just hadn't made a decision for myself based on something that was exciting to me. To move forward with an action that was exciting was too risky. It just felt too dangerous for me. Yeah. So this was the first one that I was like, this is great. I have these people that I talk to all the time. We're exploring these different kinds of psychological avenues. We're doing this just like strange exploration together that's like fun and exciting and feels stimulating. And so I went forward. I went to New York. I met everyone, and a lot changed from that point. Were you going to say something?
No, keep going.
Okay. So this is part of the story where I meet John. John and I meet in person. I was not expecting anything to come out of that, because when I made the decision to go, I was going based on these like very platonic connections that I had, just smart people to be engaging with, that I valued a lot and seemed to value me. So it was like, of course I'm going to go. And then John and I meet. There's something instantaneous. And I'm trying to decide on how much detail I want to go. Okay, well, whatever. Just things changed from that point. Whether or not it was focused on John, because I do think that had nothing come out from this sort of like activation that John and I had together, my life still would have been different. I still would have changed my like dynamic back in Florida. And the reason for that was because on this trip, I think I spent like 4 days there, maybe 5. I can't fully remember, but I was engaged the whole time. I was talking the whole time. I was getting to explore these new people and getting to interact in these, just like a very eclectic group of people that I was not expecting to get along with so well and to resonate with so well and to feel accepted by so quickly. And I found myself, just alive, just feeling very renewed, feeling very connected to myself and what I had to offer, feeling like a lot of who I am was allowed in this space. And like, I didn't have to be self-conscious, which is something we talked about even earlier in this conversation. Like the lack of self-consciousness put me in touch with myself in a way where I didn't have to be monitoring my behaviors. So then I'm flying back home and I know immediately that I have to leave my relationship instantly.
Yeah.
It was like I was in a drought of this type of, this like quality of connection and energy. And to just have that be a vacation and to come back into a space where I can no longer engage with that, I just couldn't do it. It wasn't, I couldn't. Another way to say it is that trip put me in contact with how much bending and stretching and adapting I was doing, and how far away that put me in touch with my like normal regular shape outside of all of this shifting. And it was just too much of a stretch. I just couldn't keep it going. You know, especially because like me and my ex at the time were engaged. The attachment mission wasn't going to work. The only way that we were going to stay in this sort of harmonized space is if I stayed in this shape that is just not my natural state. It wasn't going to change. This is what the relationship was going to be like. And I was not satisfied. It just wasn't hitting me on a soul level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I mean, this is a pretty interesting, I've never quite framed it like this, but the 9 thing, it's kind of like, you know, we talk about going numb a lot, and what the numbness does is it prevents you from noticing how hungry you are.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Or how hungry your soul is or something like that. And, and, you know, the trip was certainly, a turning point for you, you know, whether or not it was going to turn into the relationship, but just because it was in person, you were saturated in this new environment in which you could actually fully be yourself. But you know, I really liked how you set it up with this. Just you already felt something in you knew that this was a good place for you. You know, this was, and yeah, it's funny. I like Kristen's interview is about to come out, and she has a totally different life story, but a similar thing where she went through this long period of like dissociation, depersonalization, and the thing that kept drawing her attention was the dream world of the unconscious. And it's kind of like there's some intelligence that your life force has independent of your personality, and your life force just like it understood that this community, this way of talking to people, this way of engaging with life is good for you. It's nourishing, it's replenishing, it's renewing, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And in contrast to the way that you framed up your relationship with your ex, as you couldn't go, there was nothing in that relationship that could renew you. And you found something that was renewing. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's a weird irony that I allowed that relationship based on the perceived danger, the lack of perceived danger, but the actual like dangerous thing was the fact that there was nothing necessarily calling me towards that relationship to begin with. You know what I mean? Like nothing, he didn't hurt me in that relationship. I ended up like hurting myself. Just from staying disconnected from myself. Anyway, that was kind of lousy phrasing, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Another angle on this too, so you were speaking to the recognition that my soul knew this would be good for me, or that I would be that it would be nourishing for me. And somehow it feels like no coincidence that this was the first like real course of action that I took for myself. You know, I'm sexual blind. And so there are certain I would argue that this was I would say in my life, this would be my second, because I think the first for me is claiming a music major, which was like the first risky choice ever.
Okay.
But that's besides the point. At this point, I would say that was the first real leap towards something that was really calling me and really activating me. And I remember even in the wishy-washiness of will I, won't I had to keep talking myself into sort of like, I don't know how to phrase it, like a lack of affectedness that would happen. Like my phrasing was like, I'm just going to go hang out with friends. And if I don't like them, I'm going to come home. Like nothing's going to happen. It's fine. I'm just going to go hang out with people. And then I'm going to come back. Never mind the fact that I've never fucking met any of these people, that these are people I met on the internet, you know, like this stranger danger is just like written all over this. And I just dismissed all of that because I knew somehow.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, it's not actually that I knew, because I knew that I didn't fully know. Like I didn't have certainty, but I knew that it could. There was like a couldness that could happen, and that was worth it. The worst that could the worst that could happen is that I got there, felt really disconnected, and then nothing would happen. So I think another angle was that I just like needed something to happen. And so the pursuit of the something that could happen towards something that was calling me was enough.
Yeah. So, okay. So you have this moment, you meet John, and then obviously you guys are now in a relationship. And
yeah.
So, you know, one thing that I found as a 3 is that, especially as a triple attachment 3, is that I'll have some profound life awakening, you know, just like a true moment of awakening that changes my life. It happened with piano, it happened with the Enneagram, and there's others I could probably talk about, but it's like there's a certain lightning strike, and it's like, well, everything is different now. And
yeah.
And the funny thing about me having a 3 ego is that you think to yourself, or I think to myself, I've arrived. I this is me. I'm fully me now. I never have to worry ever again about inauthenticity.
Yeah.
I am here.
Yeah.
And
yeah, man, I so relate.
Yeah. And I've been humbled again and again that just isn't true, and the pattern is alive. And so as a triple attachment 3, I find myself adapting in ways or dissociating in ways or whatever that I only wake up to weeks or years later, and I'm like, oh God, it happened again. And so here you are. You moved to New York. You moved in with John, and more 9ness, more triple attachment stuff has found its way into your life. And so yeah, let's go in that direction.
Okay. A little bit before that though, is and this is just a quick thing. Like I want to emphasize how fast the move was. Yeah. How quick.
Okay.
Like I am in New York. Within, I believe, 2 weeks, the relationship is over. And within like a week from that, I am in a new apartment. Like,
wow.
It's very fast. It was very fast.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. It was this weird, like, stars aligning into my triple attachment body. This was like weird parting of the seas where I am suddenly super fucking clear on what I need to do, how I need to do it, and that it needs to happen right now. And so it was this like, I don't know, this like weird big life 9 force thing that came out. And it was like, you know, there was like some guilt, there's some feelings, of course. But everything was just very clear and focused, and it happened very quickly. And it's kind of funny because knowing you now and how quickly and how focused you can move, I was like, Josh would have been really proud of me during this time. I was like, I was so fast. It was just very clear, and nothing was going to stop me. It was just like a love. I'm repeating the same word over and over again, but it was just like a clarity that told me not only can I go back, I like have to move now because the window is going to close and I can't get stuck here. Cause now I'm aware of like a misery that I didn't realize I was in, and I can't get stuck here.
Excellent.
So moved really fast. I am in my own apartment for like maybe, I think it was like 8 or 9 months or something like that. And then again, there was this weird parting of the seas. The universe like helped me move to New York. I ended up crashing my car by accident, obviously. And I got this check from the totaling or whatever it's called, the settlement, that helped me cancel my lease, get rid of my car. I moved to New York. There was no plan. I didn't have a job lined up. It was just like, okay, now I have to the window is going to close. I have to do it now, because if I don't, I will get stuck in some dumb pattern again. I know it. I've been alive for like 28 years at this point. I'm like, I fucking know what's going to happen if I don't move right now. Yeah, so that was some weird hacking of my own personality that happened at that point. But then, yes, now I'm in New York. I move right into John's apartment. I have left my family back in Florida. I've left my friends back in Florida. I don't have a job at this point. And I'm not in a neutral space. I moved into the apartment that John had at the time. So it is thrust out of like, I'm taken myself. I took myself out of the environment that wasn't satisfying, but I knew it to be mine, and launched into this new place that I'm completely unfamiliar with, but that John is very familiar with. So yeah, it was like exciting for a little bit, being in New York, being in a different city, having a different routine, all of that kind of stuff. But eventually, as I think is typical for not just 9 and triple attachment, but the sexual blind stacking, I'm like wanting some, what's the word I want to use? I'm like needing to find my footing. I need to know the lay of the land now. I need to know how things are working. What do I fit into? What is my relationship to my environment, to the people around? How do I orient myself now?
Yeah.
What's the word? How do I achieve a new homeostasis? And I would like to say, well, this is relating to what you were saying, that you'll have these like cataclysmic moments where you're like, I'm done. I know who I am. I've individuated. I know my identity, blah, blah, blah. I'm finished. I definitely had that for a little bit where I'm like, I've defeated the Enneagram. I've risen above. I did it. But that definitely did. But that, of course, did not happen. And it was this slow new process of, I'm gonna be so sloppy about how I explain this, but it was this new process of realizing that I am just attaching into my new environment. You know, I know John loves me. I know the podcast loves, like I know that I have like the love and admiration of these people. That fucking does not matter to the attachment pattern. And in certain ways, considering that I have a 3 fix, like in certain ways, that is what ignites this new attachment. Like now I've left. I don't have my original reference points. So now I'm going to use this like new admiration, this new praise as my reference point. It was a weird process because for a while, I don't know that I've actually told them this. I guess they'll find out now. For a while, I was stressed out by being sort of like held up as the person that has like figured out the sexual blind spot. Like she did it. Now it's integrated and it's done. That was stressing me out. For
because people were just asking you about it again and again about it, right? It was you became the spokesperson for the sexual blind revolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was happening was like, you guys don't understand. This was like an impulse that I followed, but I'm not understanding yet. I'm still fucking confused all the time. I still have these insecurities where I'm like, and it was this weird dual-sided thing where like, first of all, I'm not understanding it for my own. And similar to this interview, now I'm feeling all the eyes expect me to understand. So it's this like, and it's just the attachment pattern at work, because now I'm like trying to understand for myself, not even for myself, so that I can perform understanding to the new people that are watching me. Just to keep the thing going. Like I moved into these new attachments, definitely autonomously, but I could feel the pattern kicking back up where I'm not liberated anymore. Now I have new pressures being put on me, and they don't know they're doing that, but I feel it. Yeah, that was definitely confusing for a while. I remember there was a big chunk of time where the conversation was surrounding individuation, and that was another thing that was pointed at me a lot, like triple
Right.
attachment. How do you individuate? How do you locate? I was thinking on the fly. I do think I'm pretty good at doing that, so I don't think I was like dishonest in any way, but there were certain points of time where I was not speaking out of like having the time and space and the solitude to come to conclusions on my own. I was just trying to maintain a new standard that I felt like I was being held to.
Yeah. And I'll add,
Mm-hmm.
again, this is I have a very strong sense that this is accurate, but I'm also speaking from my own experience. So
Okay.
I'm accurate for you. But so
Mm-hmm.
here's what I think. When you have this kind of revolution of selfhood and you wake up and you realize I've not been myself, I've been attached into a misery that I wasn't even aware of. And it's almost like you shift into a new level of consciousness that you then become loyal to. There's
Mm-hmm.
a new rung on the consciousness ladder that you are now anchored to, and your
Yeah.
self sense is that, and that thing is very, very, very sensitive to any form of adaptation that
Yes.
you're doing that feels like an abandonment of your self center.
Yes.
And
Yes. Very well said.
yeah. And so there's a constant monitoring of how much of myself am I being versus how much of myself am I not being. And when you're being asked, tell us about how you integrate your sexual blind spot, and you're speaking about it publicly, it feels like speaking from not self. And
Yes. God. Yes. Mm-hmm.
that tension creates a kind of shame, or a kind of, at the very least, there's like an elasticity. It's like, I want to come back to self. I don't want to
Yeah.
leave this,
Mm-hmm.
but
Exactly.
the attachment pattern is that I also don't want to lose people's respect. So I do want to speak to
Exactly.
it. And so
Yes.
a whole new pattern emerges, which is this
Yes.
like negotiation of self and the people that are now admiring me for having discovered and anchored to this self, but now asking me questions that are taking me out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. God, that is so perfectly put. And this showed up in a few different things, in a few different ways, not just talking about individuation and the sexual blind spot, but this change and the reignition that it brought me, and the sort of, I don't know, it did really feel like a rebirth. And like like my like waters were moving again. This brought me back in contact with my my studying of astrology, and I was able
Right.
to like really dive into it with a lot of vigor and a lot of attention and a lot of enthusiasm. Up until this point, I had always loved astrology and I'd always been studying it, but I didn't. It was always just like a sexual blind compartmentalization of like, I like this, but this is outside of what is practical and necessary. And so that's just really in the free time kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now with this like whole change, I made an intention to make that my priority, to really like develop myself in this way. And I did. I was reading a ton. I was practicing. I was reading a bunch of people's charts, just experimenting, just playing on my own, talking to other people about it. And then I feel like too prematurely, I put the pressure on myself to make this a static thing.
Yeah.
And I think like that's just a lesson I'm going to have to keep learning over and over and over again, is like I need to not be attached to any kind of staticness.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a conversation you and I have explored too. Is attachment supposed to be hexad in the sense of a fixed location? I don't think so.
Right.
And I think that's what I had been trying to do. I'd been trying to discover my fixed location, but then that left me no wiggle room.
Yeah.
And then I found myself putting astrology at a distance, even though I had just been so excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this weird cognitive dissonance, again, because then people were looking at me as this astrology person when I'm like, yes, but leave me alone so that I can actually be that.
Yeah. there's a lot to say about that. I mean, there's your six fix attaching into the hexad heavy orientation of the
Right.
group, which is that, hey, attachment people, fucking, why don't you just figure shit out? Like
Right.
locate yourselves.
Right.
And so the ego project of locating yourself. The other thing too is I think that there's something very precious that emerges after a rebirth like you experienced. And one of the things that emerges is a sense of the sacredness of what is mine, and
Mm-hmm.
a sense of the fragility of it, or like the not wanting it to be fucked with, and
Yes.
and the sensitivity of it to literally anybody's gaze. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so
Yes, of course.
here you find yourself in a new group. You're now like a person on the podcast. People are now talking
Mm-hmm.
about your astrology work. You're in a state of sort of ambivalence about promoting your own astrology work. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it's now out there dilutes the privacy of it for you. And
Yes.
it takes
That's
it away.
right.
It takes it away from that sacred thing. I watched this interview once with Toni Morrison that I just loved. And it was, she was talking about, she was being interviewed by a white reporter that was asking her some pretty racist questions. One of the things she was like, the woman was asking her, are you ever going to incorporate more white characters into your work? And she was like, well, kind of reframing the entire thing. And she basically said, I was interested in Black readership, and I wanted to keep myself protected from the white gaze,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could go to where the fertility was, where the soil was, which is the work.
Yeah, the fertility. So good.
And so she had this real sense of protecting her own private practice of the writing, which there were certain environments in which she felt safe to reveal it, maybe the Black gaze or whatever, but there was a quality of gaze that fell upon her work that would contaminate it, or that would do violence unto it in a way that would make it harder for her to tune into the work,
Mm-hmm.
that would, you get what I'm saying? And I think that so there's something like that, going on here. And there's this negotiation for you of, what do you contain in this private chamber? What do you reveal? What don't you reveal? And all these questions, what's yours, what's not yours, that whole thing, I think, is something you've been navigating.
For sure. Yes. I've been trying, because what happens when I feel like my privacy is invaded is a strong word, but it, just feels that way sometimes. When I feel like my privacy is invaded, that is when all of my like performing starts, or that's when I feel like the temptation to perform starts. Because now I'm not in this, like, I'm not behind, how do I say this? I'm not just playing and alchemizing and discovering on my own. Now I'm being looked at for some final product, or at least that has been like the heavy conditioning that I've had from, I don't know, childhood or something like that. Is just like performing. When I'm looked at, I'm here to make you comfortable.
Right.
I'm here to perform to your standards. I'm here to make you feel safe. That's it. That's all I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So a new practice, I don't even know if this is related or not, but it comes up in this conversation, is like where I'm landing right now. A lot of what the sexual instinct for me is just the states of unself-consciousness and play. And that's all it is for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I feel like my highest creativity comes from. Where I can just practice, and not practice in like I feel like even social self-pres can take something as like unrefined as what practice is supposed to be, and try to make it into this like smooth line ballerina practice, like that kind of thing. Like practice is sometimes too charged a word for me. Even it sounds too disciplined. It needs to be playful and just fun and kind of messy. and with no expectation of any result. That's what that's what it is to me as it stands right now. And so what I'm learning is maybe I can play in front of people and have that be some new kind of development. Like even in this conversation, I don't have anything prepared, and I recognize how like all over the place I've been bouncing sometimes, but I feel really good right now. So you guys are just going to get what you get.
Yeah. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about this formulation of this rebirth, and then discovering the center of you that is yourself, and then that being the sacred thing that you're trying to protect, but that it's dangerous to reveal it, because then it kind of, like, the image in my head is like as soon as you open the door that contains it, it dissolves into like all its petals just like fall away. And it's like, and then you have to like reconstitute it, and then that's a private thing, and you have to and so and you have to like go away from everybody to like reconstitute. This is my experience anyway. Certainly. Yeah. And that thing that once it is constituted, that's the thing that when that thing chooses something, then it was your choice. Like I choose this friend group, I choose this pursuit, I choose this artistic or creative outlet, whatever. Like that's when because it was made by this thing. But if it's made by that thing in a moment when it's diffusing, and it's funny. I was talking to John recently, and I forget exactly what I was talking about, but it had something to do with just getting washed out by somebody's expectations of me or something like that, and not being able to bring myself to negotiate for myself or something like that in the moment. And he goes, I always have a sense of myself as like there's always activity out there, but there's always like me in this little box inside me. Like, and I can always go there. I can always just find that, And so even if I'm in the conversation with you right now, he's like, I can always just be in my box and then know where I'm at, And that's rather than over-locating yourself as an attachment type into a precise and a position that has longevity, the attachment project, or the attachment growth project, is really finding that box, and protecting that box for yourself.
Yeah.
So, so here we are in this life moment for you where you're still engaged in the process of discovering what your life, your box, your box, and the choices you're making from that place in terms of, what parts of John's world that you've entered into are your choice, and what aspect or expression of astrology is your choice, versus a thing that gets over, or the thing that gets like contaminated by, or stretched too far by other people's expectations,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I experience it as decided upon. I experience it as gets decided upon by other people.
There you go. Yeah.
And sometimes I guess that's
and
sometimes what
there's your 9 autonomy. That's the autonomy piece right there.
Yeah.
From the 9.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It has felt like for example, a lot of the like specialness and the sacredness of what I feel exists in my relationship with John, and a lot of the like liberation like within myself that has come from this is just a certain way that John sees me. I feel like he sees me for my eccentricity and for my specificity, even if I don't fucking know what that is. And a lot of the beginning of our relationship was feeling kind of startled that he could see that, but also excited that he could see that. But then I think what has happened, or what was happening for a little bit, is that I was kind of in this like frenzied state of like, oh, does he still see that? Like I was over relying on his ability to see that instead of experiencing it for myself. So then what happened and this relates to what I said earlier about other people deciding it for me, is that I would take, again, an external gaze on what my eccentricity is, what my flavor is, and then I would just decide that that was probably true, or at least start to experiment with that as like what could be true. So a lot of my processing and my process has been, okay, they feel that way. Do I feel that way?
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, and it was this weird hack too, because it did come from me. Like, he didn't put astrology on me. I was already practicing astrology, but then it was like the vigor with which he said it, I don't know, did something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of it is like has been a reclaiming, kind of, not from him or from other people necessarily, but just like from myself. Again, I really want to emphasize the like accountability that attachment needs to take. If I think other people are putting things on me, it's because I'm giving them the power to put things on. I'm responding
There you
to
go.
them instead of myself.
That's right. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So a lot of it
good.
is just bringing it back to myself of like, okay, if Emika, for example, wants me to like, I don't know, study pine cones because that's specific, and I've like played with a pine cone. I don't know, this is a weird example. Played with a pine cone once. Do I want to do that? Or like, how do I want to relate to that? Is that something I see as important? You know, like there are ways that I can see, like another way, there are things that I recognize about John that are very much present and true and strong, and I think very defining, that he doesn't take on as himself. That he doesn't like, that's not what he like values within himself, even though it is an external value of mine onto him.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So I think seeing that in that way, like people can appreciate things about me that I don't care about, that I don't want to focus on, because that's great that you like that, but like I am more enlivened by this, so I'm going to do this.
Wow,
you can enjoy whatever you saw.
That's good. I'll be thinking about that one for a while. That's good. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I've even fully answered that question. Mm-hmm. Or if it's even obvious to anybody watching the interview, like where I'm at in my process, but it's still definitely, it's been just a process of re-attuning and constantly, and this is another thing that needs to be emphasized, constantly re-attuning myself to what I'm excited by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another example I can even put into this is like the reality TV stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been, I think it was like David that was the first person that's like, you really need to be louder in the social space with like all of this kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I think what started happening, this is a different language for the same thing, but I think what started happening to me was as soon as I would feel pressure, I would just kind of shut down. Even if it did come from me. This happened with astrology. This happened with, with the reality TV stuff. And only a few weeks ago have I finally taken the jump on reality TV because I decided how I want to do it.
Yeah. And
then I want to do it. That it's like actually fun for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And for context, I've heard you talk about reality TV with the Enneagram since I've met you. Mm-hmm. Which, how long have I known you now? I
mean, we met quickly in 2020.
2020, right? Yeah. So yeah, since I have known you, that's been your thing. Mm-hmm. But so
when I moved here, I moved here in 2021. I'd say maybe that.
Sure.
But yes.
Yeah. I'm noticing the time, but I want to kind of move into one other territory before we close. The way that you have been discovering or rediscovering intimacy from a social point of view and friendship and the trip that we just had and the choosing and being chosen from that place that is your constituted center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been really big. That's been a really big processing for the past couple of days. So for context, a bunch of us just met up in Chicago. We had a great time with each other. There were people that came to this trip that were on the last trip that we all met up with each other and got to hang out in. But what happened for me is I was able to reach a level of intimacy with them that I didn't have the opportunity to. And that was really profound for me and really affected me in ways I didn't expect to be affected. And let's see, how do I even want to jump into this? It's just opened up a lot of confessions to myself. One of them being that I don't think, okay, so I'm a social type, social self-pres. And intimacy, both in relationships and in friendships, have always been extremely important to me, but I've always felt like a chronic distance from intimacy in both my relationships and my friendships with people. And I think what this last trip did was it put me in touch with the ways that distance, that a lot of that distance has been at my own doing, has been at my own hiding, dismissing, I don't know, things like that. Like I even recognize a way that I can be kind of snobby and I can be kind of judgmental, and I can prefer, this is all subconscious of course, but there's a way that I can prefer to be around people that I can have criticism towards, not externally, but I can feel criticism towards as a way to justify distance. Because I think what distance does is it keeps me from intimacy, because I think like as much as I want intimacy, what comes with that kind of contact with love is it's a huge call to action to face a lot of your wounding. It's an enormous, at least that's what I've been experiencing. It's an enormous call to action to face, for me, feelings of unworthiness. You know, I've been talking this whole conversation around feeling like I need to perform and not just be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what happened on this trip was there was one point where me and some of the girls were expressing how we like want to be closer friends with each other and how we like already love each other. And I'm trying not to get emotional in this. I was told, how do I collect this? Without giving too much away, basically I was shown that I was already loved and already cared for in ways that I didn't feel like I earned. Because I didn't know to try to earn it. You know, I don't know if that's totally making sense, but this like concept of just being loved freely was specifically in the context of friendship. This idea of being loved freely and being in intimacy freely. God, I don't know. Just put me in, I guess part of what happened was it put me in contact with this like sense of grief that I have been avoiding this kind of contact for my whole life, and using my stacking as a way to do that, and using my triple attachment methods as a way to do that. Yeah, I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but there's another way that this feels like this last trip and this experience with them felt like the friendship equivalent of what happened in 2020 when I met John.
Right.
And so there is this sense that something has happened and it's going to change now. So it's just, yeah, there's been a lot there. I don't know if there's something you want to tease out of this. I got a little emotional here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can feel how close to the center of your heart this is. And just to kind of recap it's like the social self-pres snootiness combined with triple attachment. It's like there's a certain way that there's a comfort in relationships in which you can maintain an emotional distance.
Yes.
And when you genuinely love someone and sort of, gosh, wow, they love you too, like something different happens, and all of the barriers that were once over your heart have an opportunity to dissolve, and there's a thrill in that, but there's also an abject terror because it opens up that incredibly sensitive heart nerve that is, especially as a social type, that's like exceptionally precious. That is like, that's like the center of you.
Yeah. And as a social type too, that's like where the stakes are the highest.
Yeah.
So in moving along with my theme of just seeing a lack of red flags as the green flag, there's a lot of ways that even in friendships I have not made conscious choices. I've done passive accepting of whatever has been in my environment, but I have not done the active choosing and the active committing in a lot of ways. And then on top of that, because of all of my like hiddenness, I don't feel like I had been chosen either.
Right.
And so I don't know, there was a lot to this past weekend that was really, really loud and really special. And, I'm obviously still processing this, but even the other day, you and I talked about looking around, the Airbnb that we were all staying at and being like, wow, this is like a collection of like weirdos. And like, it feels like our people. It feels like this is like the family that I've chosen. And so there was some dissecting where I realized that, I don't know, that it made sense that I wasn't attracting these kind of people, that I wasn't moving forward towards these type of people. One, out of like a sexual blind spot kind of fear thing, moving towards things and towards people that I'm attracted to raises the stakes in certain ways. But then on the other hand, me doing this kind of triple attachment hiding meant that I wasn't I was kind of hiding in plain sight, like these people wouldn't have been able to find me.
Yeah.
Even if I was right in front of them because of the hiding I was doing.
Well, so here we are.
So here we are.
I feel moved to just say, we had our own social kind of friendship moment, and that was really special to me.
Me too.
And I experienced that same kind of like a really similar kind of thing where it's like we were talking about this, like having a friend is a rare thing, a real friend where
a real friend,
where that whole like both people feel like they can actually really reveal themselves and be loved and accepted for. It's just that's a very beautiful and very rare thing. And it's kind of like what I live for as a social type. Like
totally.
It's what
completely.
I live for, anyway, so it's it's really special, and I feel that with you, and
I feel that with you too.
I feel really lucky about that. So
yeah, me too. Yeah, I feel another thing I guess to say in relation to just everything we've talked about, and just to kind of wrap things up as best I can, is these past few years have been, yes, very transformative. They've been very, very difficult. There are times of like just really intense difficulty. I'm still constantly figuring out what it means to be sexually integrated, what it means to like locate where I am in a moment. I still have moments where sometimes I'm like really attached to my location to a point of stubbornness of like keeping everybody else out. And then other times I'm extremely prone to the outside to a point where I like completely lose my sense of where my own value or worth comes from. So this is like very much in flux.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't I mean, I wouldn't change anything about it because the direction that it's taking, I feel like is just, I don't know, it's just a kind of paradise that I don't think a lot of people get to experience. And so even in all this chaos, I feel just a ton of gratitude for getting to be able to struggle like this, because I feel like I'm forging, I have a real relationship that I'm allowed to show up in, that I can push, that I can challenge, that I can be messy in. There is like a real contact with love in my relationship, and in my friendships. I'm forging these friendships that I can exist with the same sort of energetic quality. Mm-hmm. And getting able to receive that, and then being able to give that back. To echo you is just, I feel like what I'm put here for.
Yeah.
So it feels good.
So, I'm taking a breath.
Yeah.
And, how are you feeling right now? What's this been like? And is there anything else that you want to say in closing?
I feel really good. There's a certain way I need to take a breath too. Mm-hmm. But I feel really good. You know, something that we didn't talk about is like how difficult it was to get this interview.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. You've been kind of trying to wrangle. I don't know. I assume you have maybe that timeline and you can just keep that to yourself. But I feel like I've been, you've been trying to wrangle me to like locate in this one interview. And I've, in certain ways been like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And then I mysteriously am not here. And so like what happens to me a lot is this kind of thing where I will really overthink something and really just like make it a lot bigger and more complicated than it is in my head. But now we're doing this, and this has been so much fun. And, this is maybe not the like polished presentation I would have like written or like wanted on, I don't know, something like that. But I feel very much myself here. And I feel very lucky to be at this interview with you. And it's just another one of those like silly lessons silly reminders where I'm just supposed to be playing. Yeah. If it's messy, that's fine.
Yeah. So it's taken about 6 months to get this interview, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that, I mean, what's just so cool about it though is that itself is the journey that we unpacked in this interview, which is your continual process of coming home to yourself and constituting and solidifying that center that is you, and choosing your life. And the interview that we would have recorded 6 months ago, it would have been interesting, but it would have certainly demonstrated a very different aspect of Nine and of you than this is. Yeah. And one of the things we were talking about that I think even this interview has been a really good demonstration of is like 9 going to 3. It's not like, I think a lot of 9s develop a certain super ego about it, where it's like, I got to get to 3. And that becomes a kind of pressure that further entrenches you into 9-ness. And the way that 9 going to 3 is sometimes held is as a kind of like, I got to get more productive. I got to get, I'm going to, sort of triumphant. Yeah. Trumpets
very like,
playing. Yeah.
Totally. Very polished and well presented.
Parade. Yeah. Yes. Like I'm going to get myself out there. But really there's just there's a thawing, and there's a just revealing of who you are. And I think in particular with you, there's the sense of just like freedom of expression and the fun and the goofiness and all that stuff that comes out. That is the light, that's the 3. That's like your heart that's actually shining through.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's really beautiful. So
thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for doing this. And
thanks for how do I say this? Thanks for staying patient, I guess.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad we also well, we had that moment. I don't even think it's recorded, or it probably is, but that moment we started this interview and we had to start over because I was being.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say one other thing. My reflection is like your story is I mean, there's a lot of ways that I relate to these like moments where lightning strikes and then things change. And but one of the things that I just respect so much about you is how you are continually engaged in your own process of what's the right way to put it? Excavating yourself. There's just like I've seen you withdraw. I've seen you I've seen you clam up in the context of our friendship or in a social, but I've never seen you give up on yourself.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah, wow. Just surprised myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I find that very beautiful.
Thank you, Josh.
Well, okay.
We did it. This has been so special. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Alexandra.